Okay. So I wanted to ask a little bit about the Unbothered Therapist and the
Mhm.
trauma-informed therapy that you do, just so like there's some background.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So yeah, I started my practice as Unbothered Psychotherapy and Wellness, and more recently have transitioned into the Unbothered Therapist, kind of as the overall brand that allows for a little bit more integration of like the somatic work, the mind-body connection, and then just kind of me as a therapist and human. And so a lot of the work that I do or support people with are common challenges for Black women, for BIPOC folks, for LGBTQ plus individuals, and um, I tend to focus a lot on family estrangement, but more recently it's been more like body disconnection. And so those who may experience family estrangement, but also are finding that they no longer enjoy movement, or maybe they've had difficult relationships with movement in their bodies because of their relationship with parents. And so I work with a lot of people to try to help reframe that.
Yeah. And so the trauma-informed part, how does that fit in?
The trauma-informed part, so that would be really in the trainings that I practice. So over, I'd say even above the modalities, it's just the idea that I'm recognizing trauma and someone's lived experiences first. And so whether they're showing up in the space for the first time or if we've been working together, I'm always going to be thinking about, okay, there may be an impact that I may or may not be aware of that is that's impacting how they're showing up in the space today. And so, if I have clients that are more guarded in a session, the trauma-informed lens in me is going to say, okay, well, maybe they have had an experience where they've worked with a provider that has practiced, medical invalidation with them. Or if someone, if I'm working with a younger client and they're just mistrustful of adults or older people, then I'm finding that, okay, they may have had an experience with a person in their lives that
Mhm.
has harmed them in some way. And so I don't make any assumption about their lived experience, but try to be curious. And I'm always thinking that, okay, there's probably more of an impact. So it causes me to not take things personally in the session. If a client is a little bit more guarded, it's not, "Oh, okay, well, I must be doing something wrong." It could be that, but I want to be curious and see, is there a different way that I can show up in the space? Or is there any sort of additional context that I need to consider?
Thank you for that. You've explained that to me when I've taken your classes, but like I said, I tried to explain it to somebody else and it
Yeah.
wasn't making sense. Like she was frowning, like, I don't get what you're talking about. And so
Oh,
thank you that I have like your words recorded now.
yeah.
And I can just, I'll
Yeah.
use your words better. It's still centered to your website, but it's just kind of like I couldn't pull the concepts together like you do, of course, to be able to talk about it. So thank you for going over that. My main reason for wanting to talk to you is I don't know how I ended up telling you that I teach mindful self-compassion,
Mhm.
but I took the class probably 2015. Was struggling with something at school and the psychologist was like, not only have you like fallen down, but you're standing over yourself, like whipping yourself for having fallen. And he was like, where's the self-compassion? I'm like, I never heard the term self-compassion. I've heard compassion that you have for others. I'd never heard of self-compassion. And he was basically like, you need to find out what it is because you really don't have much. And so
Mhm.
I did. I took the course. And what I liked was that it gave you skills on how to self-soothe and how to talk to yourself and how to recognize when like your inner critic is running the show or where does that inner critic voice come from? Like all of that was just eye-opening to me that there were ways that I was replaying things that had been said to me that weren't nice. But now
Mhm.
at this point, I'm the one that's continuing to say it. And so years later, they offered online training during COVID. And so that's when I did my training. But being able to offer that to other people and
Mhm.
talking about it when I'm talking to somebody who seems extremely harsh.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, are you aware of what you're saying about yourself? And would
Mhm.
you say that about another person, to another person? Like, how come it's okay to talk to yourself like that? And realizing that most people don't know how to self-soothe, don't know how to be kind, don't know how to just say something as simple like, this is hard. And I
Right.
understand that you're struggling and we're going to be okay. Like, let's just go for a walk or whatever. Just how to be nice to yourself. Like, I love that the training is teaching us how to do that. But then I became curious about how you use it, how you found it, and how you use it.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to say I was introduced to mindful self-compassion through a colleague when I was practicing at a DBT or dialectical behavior therapy practice. And so this practice, we worked with a lot of people with people who were diagnosed with personality disorders, primarily borderline personality disorder, where there can be kind of the highs and lows with someone's like self-regard. And so that became one of the interventions that we would pull in. And then from there, I was recommended the workbook by Christian Neff and using some of those prompts with clients. So that was my first introduction to it, really was I want to say a colleague, or maybe it was one of my clinical supervisors at the time, had mentioned, like, okay, we're seeing that a lot of our clients are running into these negative core beliefs and they're just not budging. We can tell them to use deep breathing, or we can tell them to, splash cold water on their face, but that's not changing the core beliefs that are kind of the root of a lot of their suffering. And so that felt like a missing link. And the workbook just felt really accessible for people too. So they were able to answer the questions really at any stage of change around self-compassion. And DBT also pulls a lot from mindfulness. So we were lucky to have clients too that also had a foundation of general mindfulness practices and were not new to meditation or new to any sort of grounding exercises. So it was a good kind of complement for them.
I didn't think about the grounding part of it. Definitely the mindfulness. I'm always curious. Somebody who doesn't have a meditation background, because it is mostly mindfulness meditation practices that you're doing during the course, you're teaching some concepts, but then the practice is some kind of mindfulness practice. And I have
Right.
wondered how well that works for someone who's not I want to say comfortable sitting still, but it is grounding. And I think you have to be open to
Mhm.
that part of it. I've never experienced anybody who wasn't, but it just crossed my mind when you said that, that is part of the practice for sure.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's a good point too, because sometimes there is some willfulness to it. Like I'll mention it as a potential intervention, and someone's like, I don't know, that sounds like, just like the, positive manifestations or something, or something that they don't feel it really connects. So there's some resistance I can run into occasionally. What I find is as there's more psychoeducation about what it really is, they're noticing it's not toxic positivity, because I think that's what they think it is, that I'm just going to give them these statements that they need to repeat 100 times. And it's no, my understanding of mindful self-compassion is you developing the statements that resonate with you, that translate into that practice of self-compassion and just building a regular routine around that.
Definitely the loving kindness part
Mhm.
chapter of it. So it's 8 weeks,
Mhm.
2.5 hours for the 8 week process. I've never done the workbook. I have the workbook, but I've never actually opened it and
Oh,
looked at
yeah.
it. But the training, there is one of the days is loving kindness. And so you do the typical loving kindness meditation. And then part of the time that we spend together is we break it down. Like these are the words that are traditionally said in loving kindness, but what do you want to hear? And give them time to write different things, whatever resonates for them, whatever they feel is comforting to them in the moment. And then we do another meditation where they're saying their own words, which I think is powerful. But that
Yeah.
was the first time that I had heard of loving kindness being adaptable, or that you
Mhm.
can say what it is that you need to bring comfort to yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely.
So when you say about needing training, I never thought about that either. Um, I do see, all I have is personal experience. I've
Mhm.
never talked to anybody who's taken the course to ask them how it impacted them. So most of the stuff I'm saying is just me. But I didn't know about the inner critic. And I remember much later after taking the course, I heard myself saying something nasty. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so mean. Like, has that been in there forever? And it probably has.
Hmm.
It was 100% my grandmother's voice. It was
Hmm.
something that she had said to me growing up, but I
Hmm.
couldn't believe that I was like beating up with myself with that again. And so part of the training of taking the course and learning how to teach it is you spend a lot of time with the inner critic, listening
Hmm.
to it, figuring out what it's saying. And there's kind of a spin that it's like, what purpose is it serving? Did it
Hmm.
originally come about to be motivating or, to keep you out of trouble? Like, was there a positive reason why it was created? And now it's just distorted and it's
Hmm.
starting to say things that aren't nice. But when you talked about education, I forgot. There were a lot of concepts that I learned during this course and the training that is just like, oh, that makes like, how come nobody ever talks about that? Like, that makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
So what did you find to be the education piece that you were doing when you were
Yes.
using MC?
Definitely. So I think there are a couple of modalities now. Now, as I'm hearing you speak about it too, it sounds very much like IFS or internal family systems. So
Hmm.
when I got trained in that modality, there is a big emphasis on the what we kind of call the inner child, sometimes, or yeah, the inner critic being, sometimes a collection of parts that are speaking and having these negative messages. And so through my training in that, it's to also notice where in the body that might show up, what
Hmm.
function you mentioned as well, what is it trying to serve or protect you from, and where do we notice that the loudest in the body? So both in the training and the therapy space, we're kind of connecting to a little bit differently in that role, but where, is this coming from? Maybe someone's thinking, oh, I've never been able to stick with my movement practice. Okay, where's that belief coming from? Where did that originate? And where in the body does that feel the loudest? Because that may be where we want to build some power training or strength training. Um, and the therapy side, from that education around the function has been really helpful just to reduce judgment because a lot of times it's like, oh, okay, you're thinking, quote unquote, bad thoughts. Don't think that. You shouldn't think that. But viewing it more from a functional perspective just helps us, one, create more change, and just pathologize it less because
Hmm.
99% of us have some sort of inner critic, it sounds like, or negative beliefs. Some would even go as far as say 100% of us have those. And the ability to approach them non-judgmentally
Yeah.
was a huge part of my training too, just so that we're not shaming someone into submission versus kind of moving with the flow of their system. I wouldn't say I've had formal training in mindful self-compassion. It was more a tool that was kind of, I'd say, gifted to me from a clinical supervisor at the time.
Wow.
So I think she either had let me borrow the workbook or had made copies of it. And then I ended up getting, I don't know how many copies I probably had 5 or 6 copies of these. And sometimes I give them to clients too. So
Hmm.
it's been something that I've used. I want to say I use it probably weekly, the workbook.
You're kidding. I'm so sorry. It's on my bookshelf in the living room and I didn't grab it. I grabbed my manual, but I didn't grab the workbook. That would have
Yeah.
made this so much better, but it's
Yeah.
fine.
Mhm.
Um, there's not a lot of physical practice in the 8 weeks. There is walking meditation.
Mhm.
And there is something called Sense and Savor where you go outside and you kind of are mindfully walking and paying attention to colors and, and that kind of thing, stuff. But do you find I want to say that clients are open to the
Mhm.
mind body connection. Do you think it helps more when
Mhm.
the body is engaged? I'm a yoga teacher, and
Mhm.
I find that a lot of stuff comes up during yoga, especially like doing things that most people, lean forward during the day or driving. When we're doing chest openers or hip openers, it seems like more stuff like people might start crying or you just a story start coming up. Do you find that the body being involved makes it, I don't know the word that I want. I don't want to say more intense because that makes it scary, but makes it more effective to have both.
Okay. I think so. When I first started practicing, there was definitely some resistance because I think, there's these I guess common messages you hear like, oh, where do you feel in the body? And it feels like this just cliche thing to say. But I think people are becoming more, I think, just more aware of mind body connection and or have experienced body related trauma, and so are noticing kind of the connection there. And so I have found that incorporating the body has allowed people to have more access to that practice,
Hmm.
and also speak about it more freely because I think going into the core beliefs can be it can be a scary territory to go into,
Yeah.
the negative cognitions, the inner critic, and us doing that through more recently, I've been doing more movement therapy. And so we're actually laying out, on the mats and we're maybe using the bands or stretching while we're speaking. And
Mm.
that has helped people connect, where they're feeling things in the body or noticing, okay, as I'm speaking about this, I noticed my shoulders got really tight or my back started to arch. And so we then bring attention there through movement, and then that helps us kind of move further in the conversation.
Yeah.
So I have found people be really receptive to it. At first, I was like, I don't know if people are gonna, take well to this or, but it's been pretty seamless. And I think also more recently with the way that kind of my practice is marketed, most clients, as they're coming to me, they know that there's some sort of mind-body connection.
Okay.
So it's not as frequent where I have to do a lot of the convincing, I guess I would say.
Yeah. That's interesting because I've only taught online so far because I started the training during COVID. And so I was thinking, like, for the sense and savor, you are kind of like turn off your computer and go outside. And people are like, huh? It's like,
Right, right.
you have 15, 20 minutes to just go walk around outside. And even when I took it in person and we were in downtown DC, and it was
Mhm.
like, but there's buildings, it's not like, we're out in nature and we can walk around. But it was something about getting up and physically moving or, the fresh air or whatever the thing was like after, like I was resistant. But then after you
Mhm.
did it, you're like, oh, now I get that it is different to just be sitting in a room all day
Yeah.
as opposed to really taking in what the concepts that are being taught, but walking around mindfully outside, it does make a huge difference. But so I get the resistance because it's like, what's that got to do with what we're talking
Right,
about? And it's just
100%.
kind of like, well, experience it and, see what you think. And there was I forget the term of it, but mindful eating. And so the teacher brought in like peanuts and sweets
Mm,
and sour and different taste. And so you're, to take a small bite and kind of feel the texture, inhale the scent and all that kind of stuff. And I had a lot of judgment about that too. And it's just kind of like, I'm not here to eat 10 peanuts in 30 minutes. It's just kind of,
yeah.
but the same thing is like, we don't realize how much we're shoving food in our mouth, like trying to get to the next thing. And
Hmm.
the concept of mindful eating and that you digest your food better, or whatever the thing is like,
Yeah.
oh, that never would have even crossed my mind. And so there were things that I have to admit I was resistant to, but then you do the practice and it's like, oh, now I understand
Mhm.
why that's part of. It's connecting you back to yourself in a
Yeah.
way that you're not doing when you're rushing to eat or you're watching TV when you're eating or something.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that slowing down, I think, is super important. And a lot of the ways in which we're taught are just rush, or the inner critic is saying, I'm not where I should be, or I should be further. And I think the work around mindful self-compassion also helps meeting ourselves where we're at and helping us slow down to do those kind of practices like the, intuitive eating or mindful eating, the walking meditations,
Mhm.
or I'm someone with ADHD, so I tend to like, I don't know if reject is the right word, but resistant to a lot of
Mhm.
seated meditations. Um,
Oh,
and so,
really?
yeah, so sometimes I struggle with them. And I think that's, part of my negative self-belief of like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to sit and focus, so I'm just going to disengage. But I found doing different positions with my body, and there's a position that I learned called willing hands. And that's just kind of palms facing open, kind of opening up the chest and the body. And that, whether it's psychosomatic or not, it does help me feel more engaged with the practice. And so I tend to do it when I am doing yoga poses or meditations. And then I gravitate towards more of the walking or movement meditations too. So things like nature baths, I really enjoy being able to have, the sound bath, but that's outdoors
Hmm.
and hearing all of the water or the leaves or the wind. Um, and find that that helps just, I think, connect to our healing a little bit further or deeper than sometimes we can do in the traditional like healing space.
Yeah. I told you I just came back from the beach and it was
Yeah.
freezing. But
Yeah.
listening to the sound of the ocean
Hmm.
and being able to see like the whole, periphery was all ocean, like the power of the ocean, like something about that I find extremely comforting. Not that, I'm weird in that, but it's just, I love to be around trees. I love to be at the mountains, but there is something about the power of the ocean that's very calming and very settling that I didn't think about until after taking this course and finding different places where I feel that calm that I feel when I'm meditating. Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah. Something you said, there was a word negative core beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if that was in the manual, and I don't want to like sit here and thumb through it, but what I do remember, we spend time talking about core values.
Hmm.
Like, what are your core values?
Yeah.
And is the way that you're running your life in line with that? And if
Hmm.
it is out of alignment, like what you could do to bring it back into alignment. Is that the same as core beliefs, or is that something different?
Yeah, similar. I'd say the core beliefs are kind of a mix of that and like the inner critic. And so typically when we're labeling core beliefs or identifying them, they are derived from our values. So yeah, I'm not far enough in life, or I should be further in my career, tied to, okay, I want to achieve, or that's important to me, or that I do have more of we talk about the striving and non-striving mindset sometimes too, and it connects more to that. So in EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, we label negative core beliefs or negative beliefs as well. And so they both kind of translate into what, yes, what beliefs are the loudest right now. And I've oftentimes find the evaluatory ones, the ones of like better, worse, shouldn't
Mm,
tend to fall in this category where I'm more likely to pull out the mindful self-compassion work and workbook,
okay.
or
Okay.
even use that to help support us. Okay, what do we want to believe eventually to replace this with?